Welcome to the Samuele Tini Show, where business, innovation, and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in.
Welcome to a new episode on the show. And today we are going to discuss again what is dear to our hearts, innovation and sustainability. And we do it with an expert that is really a change maker that is working on circularity and how to foster investment, being an innovation expert and of course the co-founder of the Una Terra. So I'm very pleased to have us today at the show, Costas Papayconomou. I hope I pronounced it correctly. Thank you so much, Costas, for being here with us today.
And thank you for inviting me. And I could not have said my name better than you. So perfect.
Fantastic, Costa. And I think you have co-founded a very successful enterprise. You are now at Una Terra fostering circularity, really pushing, for a change also on the paradigm of the extractive to regenerative economic. But before of that, we want to know a bit more about you, how you have ended up being a change maker in the innovation space.
That's a good question. So I have been very lucky with my professional career. I mean, I've been very lucky in my private life as well, by the way. But professional career started as an engineer, where I, for 10 years, basically did classic engineering things or engineer things like designing products, designing machines, designing production environments, which really grounded me in how things are made. And then my second career, which was a little bit my claim to fame for quite a while, was as one of the co-founders of a consulting business called Happen. We were basically a creative innovation agency, and we work with all the big multinationals across the world in consumer goods. So it's literally the things you find on supermarkets, and we helped these companies to understand better what you could say the emerging needs in their markets were. Not trends, not high up stuff, but very specific needs and frustrations consumers had, and then how to actually create a product which would answer those needs, which wouldn't only be good news for the consumer, but also good news for the company. And we discovered there was a real gap here, because a lot of these large multinational FMCGs, as they're called, they're very good at creating, let's say, better, more expensive things, or cheaper, worse things. But what they're bad at is actually figuring out what can they really make. And you could say that DNA of being very grounded in what our market needs and what are your own technical capabilities to make things, that DNA has ended up in Una Terra very strongly. For me, the Una Terra journey starts, 4 years ago, roughly. We had sold, I together with my partners at the time, we had sold the agency to Accenture. And after leaving the Accenture, that gave us basically the time and money to do other things. And I chose the path of investing, which coincidentally a former client of mine, Luca Zerbini, had just sort of embarked on, and together, well, now we're here, created a fund, and we're doing this not just with our own money, but also with investor money, which is a very nice sort of a professional step forward. No longer me just saying to do this, but literally saying, I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and come join me when we do this. Yeah. In selling an agency into another company. So here's the thing. We were both market leaders in what we did. Happen was the market leader in innovation consulting, 60 people, and Accenture, market leader in automation, ERP, MRP, and 600,000 people. And what we learned is, even if you are both best in the world, you will not integrate unless your business models are roughly the same. And they were very different. So in the end, you could say a few years later, it wasn't a particularly successful, acquisition, because I had expected that to be my third career. And given we're talking here about Una Terra, it isn't. And the team slowly dismantled, because you need to, what we had never realized, and the Accenture team had also not realized, is if you have one company doing $100,000 projects with maybe 2 people, 3 people, and a number of these projects at the same time, and the acquiring party is doing $20 million projects with teams of 100 people, the two don't necessarily mix well. And it's not about culture or any of that. That was not the problem. It's literally, what are you set up to sell? What is the machine you've built? And that's, I think, a theme which we'll be talking more about in this podcast, because businesses are machines. They are designed to operate in a certain way, and you have to respect that. And if you sort of go against it, you basically invite trouble.
And this is, I think, also a critical lesson that shapes also how you invest and how you evaluate businesses in your work with Una Terra. For our audience that may be they don't know. I mean, can you give us in simple terms what is Una Terra? What is the mission, and why you have focused a lot on sustainability and circular economy?
Yeah, so I guess for anyone outside, they would look at Una Terra and they would see a venture capital investment fund. And we in particular focus on what you could say the early growth stage. So for people in the industry, they typically think of, like, say, Series A, and that means this is a business that has sorted out its technology. It knows what it wants to do, and it has its first customers, and it's now looking to do that at scale. Now, the domain we chose to operate in, close to our heart, is the circular economy. So it is the material streams that already exist out there in the planet, just basically everything from raw materials through to finished products, and to make those material streams more circular. So that, I guess, implies also that we are, let's say, within this huge area of sustainability and becoming more circular, we're very materials focused. We're very much focused on physical products that are made in factories, whether it's packaging materials or food ingredients or textiles for fashion. It's all about how do you make these more circular. And I guess what that implies is when you're working on a product or a material, you need to be acutely aware of, will it work in the existing systems? And that is, I guess, it's a little bit a double-edged sword, because for us, it's the obvious way to look at this market, which is how we find very successful investments. But it's not how the investment space typically thinks, who tend to operate from a winner takes all model. We need the whole system. We're going to build the universe like Facebook, but then in production. And the reality is, if you have a packaging material and it won't run on the packaging lines at PepsiCo, then you will never sell your new packaging material at PepsiCo. It's really that simple. So you have to respect the industry you're going to operate in. And it's, yeah, that's what we do. That's what we're now also getting known for. We've just finishing our fifth investment right now. And all these businesses we've engaged with fit that profile. They have a cleaner solution, a more circular solution that can be adopted by the old industry. And yeah, it sounds super obvious, but funnily enough, it seems not everyone's looking at this space this way.
And I think it's very critical because there is a huge untapped opportunity really to transform, the material, especially packaging and others. And I want to ask, you just mentioned you have done the fifth. If you have to choose one example for us to understand the journey and the impact that's really worked for you.
Yeah, well, let me start with the fourth, because that's the one we're going to announce, like literally by the time this podcast goes out, we're announcing it. Seprify is a business from Switzerland who is now branching out into Finland. And what they do is they make white colorant. And you might think, well, how boring is that? It's just white powder. But Samuele, while you're sitting at your desk and you look around you and you look at everything that is white, the walls might be white, the pen you're holding in your hand might be white, exactly, the bottle there is white. Everything that is white that isn't bleached probably is white because it's been colored white. And in let's say, the reality of putting color onto things, whether it's the objects around you or the food you eat or the cosmetics you put on your face, like sunscreen, that white is almost always titanium dioxide. And that is not a nice, say, ingredient to have definitely not in your food, because here in Europe, it's already banned. In the US, it's going to be banned. It's also not nice to have on your skin. And really, it's a filthy thing to have to pull out of the ground and process. So Seprify has found a way to create actually a brighter white even than titanium oxide using cellulose. Now, cellulose is literally what trees are made of, what the paper you have in front of you is made of. It's a standard industry. It is a material that is being processed for over 100 years. So the technology to make this colorant is actually very simple, and it's one you can license out. So what Seprify has done is they have patented the process and the form of the crystal that they can make, and that is what they're now literally bringing to the planet. And it attracts the biggest players of the world. Huge food industry players are coming in. They're saying we have to switch to a natural white, and there isn't any. We have IKEA as a lead investor in this round, who literally just say, well, we don't have a plan B really, because we want to clean up our recipes and our, let's say, formulations for paint. This is the way to do it for white. So what you see really is a huge demand in the market. The demand is a mix of regulation pushing, say, the industry, and just a sense of doing the right thing. And that's when a solution like this comes through, because it's not one that is going to require whole new factories. You can basically make it in existing production facilities, and the users of the colorant don't even need to change that much in their own formulations and the way they apply it. So, and that's, you could say, why we're excited, but also why this is a perfect example of what Una Terra does. It is clean up a filthy old industry with smarter, cleaner solutions that come through when you're forced to think about it. Because if you look at any, making a bit of a generalization, but if you look at any older industry out there, it works perfect. It's honed, it's optimized, etc. But underneath is always a driver, which is a little bit of laziness, coming from abundance that has always been there. And the funny thing is the domain of circular economy, which we landed on because as founding team of Una Terra, we know these industries well. We thought, but hold on, if you can make a new product which uses less energy and less material, then not only are you by definition already on the sort of better for planet path, but you're also on the path for commercial because it's cheaper to make. And if you can then keep the price point the same because the performance is better, what's not to like? It's really not that hard. But I guess, yeah, but as I mentioned, I'm now talking about white powder, colorant. Another investment of ours is paper pulp. Another investment of ours is just a smarter way of using textiles. They don't look exciting from the outside. I mean, one of our investments has AI involved, but the other four don't.
So it's not the typical sexy startup from
It's
Silicon
not
Valley.
sexy. Yeah, exactly. Which is really hard for some of these young companies. I'm not even calling them startups or scale-ups. They're companies. Is they don't look sexy. And this is also why it's very hard, the stage we're getting in, early growth, when some real money needs to come in to start really putting money or product in front of buyers and procurement teams. It's very hard for these companies to raise because, yeah, they don't look like something that will become a unicorn, even if they might. Yeah, 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 yeah. And if you look at, again, physical goods, physical products, where a lot of, let's say, the pollution comes from, if you look at any product, no matter how simple, even like a plastic bottle, and you look at the number of, say, transactions that happen before it gets into your hands, not just after it's produced, but also before it's produced, there could be like 50 different sort of transaction points happening, and each and every one of them is a point where you can improve the product from a circularity point of view, from an impact point of view, but also from a commercial point of view. And that just shows that the physical world, even though it's deemed as a bit old-fashioned and sort of boring, it is huge. It's endlessly larger than the digital space from that point of view in opportunities to improve. But it's all small improvements. No one's going to revolutionize the production of a plastic bottle ever because it's too complicated, even if it looks simple. But there are 100 ways of making very meaningful, very commercially attractive, very good for planet improvements.
And this is also a very important point because, of course, we just not need unicorns. We also need tangible process, how to green also what we are doing. And in that, I want to ask, since you are in this space and then you are an expert, I want to, when you assess the businesses, the startups, and especially there is a lot of hype, discussion thing, how do you see through all this and then to see what is really industrial applicable, what is really is going to work? How do you differentiate between sometimes those two?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of benefits we have by now, given we've been going for almost 4 years, is we get very good suggestions fed to us because there's a lot of people out there who kind of know how we're different from that point of view and what we're looking for, whether it's through, a lot through co-investors, but also partners of Una Terra. But here's the great thing. Everything in the circular economy is existing economy, which means it's old industry, which means there's a huge amount of expertise around. It's not like you have to guess whether some, I don't know, face recognition AI system can do what it delivers. Because again, we're talking about colorant. I can literally look up online 100 specialists on colorant and ask, okay, is this going to work or not? So from that point of view, you're always in a domain of engineers and people who understand the topic. So for us, it's actually at an earlier stage that you get a sense of, is this an interesting company to engage with? And there are a couple of maybe features I can call out that make them interesting. So for one, even if they are still sort of raising money and sort of course, like still early stage, when they connect to someone like myself or one of my fellow founders who have industrial backgrounds and LinkedIn sort of contact lists that are this long, they are interested in talking to our network for becoming a customer, not for investment. So they are looking to ship product. That's a very sort of interesting mindset to find in a young company who might need cash just to run the operation. But the first and foremost thing they're out for is selling product. That's what they want to do. Which you can then turn around and say, given we're looking at early stage, they probably already have one or two customers who know this technology better than we ever could. Just get on the phone with them. And when you're on the phone, you realize, okay, so if this company crashes and burns, are you in trouble? And they will the ones we've invested in will say, we need this to succeed because X, Y, and Z. So then you already know, even if you're only speaking to 2, 3, 4 customers who have been trialing pilot production and who have been trialing early samples, is this business solving a real problem? And if they're not, you'll know within like a few calls. So it's actually quite easy to go from this looks interesting to this is interesting before you get to the hard nuts and bolts of, okay, how is this sort of whole scaling process going to work? What is the investment required? Because and again, that's just the benefit of working in existing mature markets is there's benchmarks for everything. Like there will never be a question of, let's say, imagine I've just invented this and it's a sustainable version of the old one. Sort of how much money can I charge for this in the market? Well, I'll just look at the millions that came before. Those will tell me exactly what I can charge for this in the market. That's very different from, let's say, the typical Silicon Valley VC mindset, which is we're launching into a vacuum. No one knows what this is. And let's figure out whether there's a product market fit or something like that. That's not a topic here. Anyway. Sorry, long answer to your question, Samuel.
No. But it's very interesting, and I think but it's also crucial because I think the boring. We had a discussion from previous episode. So to really achieve green growth, we need to tackle also the boring problems. Let's say transportation, industrialization, and all these things that are often overlooked. We don't need wonderful solution, but we really need to fix what we have. And I want to ask this question. Do you only focus, and then do you only focus on, let's say, mature economy, let's say the Western world, or you are also opening to the emerging and frontier markets in your work?
It's mainly in the mature markets in Europe even. That's kind of where our sort of 80% of our attention goes. And there's a number of reasons for it. One is just the reach we have as a young fund. There's only like 5 of us on the team. We all have a lot to do. And if you're also dealing with companies in different time zones, we're just not equipped to do that. The reality is also that in Europe, because the regulation has been so fierce already for quite a while, there's just, you could say from an environmental concern point of view, and hence from let's say how the industry around, definitely for circularity, how that now looks is there's a lot of exciting development around here. And of course, these are companies which are looking to go outside of Europe. Like one of the first investments we did was Grey Parrot, which was a UK company, very much focused on Europe. But through one of the co-investors, they've now completely opened up the American market. So but our starting point is always Europe. And I think another reason I suspect we'll probably concentrate here, at least for the next year or two, is a very, in a way, a dark one, which is the geopolitical situation across the planet. And I think if you look back just a few years ago at the tail end of the Corona crisis, then came the supply chain crisis. You might also remember when the Evergreen ship got lodged halfway the Suez Canal. What there is an acute awareness of now, which wasn't around, at least in the markets we're fishing in, let's say a year ago, but that is that these long supply chains, this overly globalized supply chain approach, is a thing of the past. And what is interesting is if you look at the circular economy and which just means a lot of reuse, a lot of local supply. I mean, in a way, it's the counteraction to breaking down long supply chains. So it's almost like you have two sides of the same coin. And if you would consider Europe operating a little bit like how Japan operates, heavy amounts of consumption, huge amounts of recycling, and sort of smart, frugal use of material and energy, Europe is likely to operate more like an island from that point of view. And circular economy actually means just bring the whole net more local. And Well, it's a long answer to your question.
No, but it's really
but
interesting because
yeah,
usually, I can see a push from regulation that sometimes is said, oh, it's still for innovation, but in this time you're saying it's pushing innovation in one side to innovate, and there is the geopolitical side that say, okay, we want to decouple, we want really also to use local material and circularity, so that is creating this wonderful opportunity to green
absolutely,
in a way
absolutely.
the
Yeah,
markets and then the
yeah.
industries.
It's a pressure cooker from that point of view, and it's demanding improvements. And the beauty of this space, which I had absolutely none of us had realized when we stepped into this. It's sort of one of the serendipitous things you learn is if you go back to that, how do you use less energy, less material, but make a better product? That is a very difficult thing to do for a large company because the responsibility for a better product lies with different people from those saving money and reducing, let's say, the cost of a product. And small companies, the ones we're investing in, don't have that problem. They can work on both at the same time. And that's also probably, and this is a little bit of a guess, but if you look at, well, at least say the investments we've done so far, all of them, you can see these are not heading for an IPO. These are heading to be a very interesting acquisition by a huge industrial player 4 or 5 years down the line because they've developed something that could never be developed in-house, along with the technology, the market for it, etc. So, yeah, fantastic space to be. Yeah, let me give you a fantastic example of that. By the way, it's a business we've not invested in the fund with the fund. I've invested in personally, and I'm on the board of. I can show it to you, but your listeners won't be able to see it. This looks like the opposite of a green solution. It's basically a plastic tub for ready-made meals. Now, why is this the perfect example of a green solution? And because it looks, again, so weird, all the investors in this space will just skip this, whereas we see, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. This is basically how you package ready-made meals, the ones you put in the microwave at home, and they go through a cold chain, as it's called. So they're cooked in a factory, chilled, and then you find them in the refrigerated section of the supermarket. This packaging has a different design and slightly different, let's say, last step of the production, which means you have a lot less food waste, but also a huge amount less energy going into the product. Because the old, let's say, standard version, you need to cook the meal, then you package it, and then you have to pasteurize it or even sterilize it, which means a huge amount of energy going in. Because you're using less energy in this, what do you think happens except it being cheaper? If you heat the product much less, it tastes a lot better. It's not cooked to mush. So the flavors are stronger, the textures are better, the nutrition is better, all the things you can then sell to the consumer for a higher price. So you're saving money and you're charging more while having a, let's say, better for planet solution, which is, again, it just shows you can get these win-win-wins if you take a little bit of a step back and you don't take the lazy approach, which is, you could say, how product development happens in way too many places. It's been, from that point of view, it's been a fantastic learning journey also for us over the past few years.
And learning, I think, is the topic of the subsequent question, because you have been a successful investor. You are now a very successful, a successful founder. Now you are a very successful investor. So if you have to share, maybe usually we say the three, but some lesson that you have learned in this journey, especially for entrepreneurs or people that want to invest, which they will be?
Well, I've written a whole book about it.
Oh,
the disruption
fantastic.
fallacy. Yeah, and there's a smaller version of it available. If people look me up on LinkedIn. It's called Stop Disrupting and Start Building, which is the Una Terra version. And it kind of says what it is. It's just don't try to disrupt too much. Make use of what's there. And I guess there are a couple of lessons hidden in that. So one is respect what exists and understand that if you are interfacing well with the world you're trying to launch something in, that you understand how that whole ecosystem around your product or your service is going to work, you're going to have a way easier journey than anyone trying to disrupt too many things at the same time. I guess what is connected to that a little bit is also how important it is to sell early. And I mean sell product early, because I remember this always fascinated me, even when we were still on the consulting side, when I was still basically working with all these big companies. You would look at these startups who only have one product, and then they're sort of trying to develop that product till it's completely finished, and then they start selling it. And I think that's just not how it works. And of course, what you then see, all these startups also fail because they've developed the wrong thing. They don't have their second product already ready in the background to come after their first launch. So the moment you have technology and a handful of brave clients who are willing, probably at a discount, to just start working with your product, then you're effectively developing your product together with your customer base, the people who need the solution you have and will help you create the best version of it. And it's always going to be different from what you think it is upfront. I mean, the same is even true for our fund. 4 years later, it's not what we thought it would be. It's in the same domain, but it's much more precise and much more honed to what the real opportunity in market is. And that's also true, let's say, for young companies trying to grow. You learn so much from your first customers. And that's, again, why, and I mentioned it before, when we look at founding teams, they have to be customer focused, not investor focused. I'm absolutely fine if they don't give me any attention whatsoever, or if I have to sort of not get a phone call back for a week because they're busy developing something for a customer. That's fine. Whereas the reality is so often it's the other way around. There's a bit of a joke amongst, let's say the type of investor we are, and the call just looking at VC investment, in particular in digital, where everyone knows the last thing you want is your investment company to actually sell a product, because the moment they sell, you can see what the price point is, and it's probably 10 times lower than they've been promising you. And in our case, it's the other way around, because there's no way to faff around with pricing, because you're always making something that is going to be a direct competitor to something that's already there. It's just cleaner. So it's again, fascinating domain to come into as a bit of an outsider. A long answer to your question. Sorry.
No, but that is wonderful. And I want maybe a subsequent question to that is sometimes, especially in this world of startups or innovation and things, there's a lot of storytelling, hypes, and people that they create very long runways, maybe on nothing or very or few
On
products.
very, very little sometimes. Yeah.
And we see it also. I mean, that is also something that we see also in the emerging market. That is the push that sometimes we have, rather than solving boring problems and problems at the grassroots, we try to solve things at the club. So maybe how do you see this balance with too much hype and lack of execution in this, and then how you are trying also to solve it with Una Terra?
Yeah, I don't know if we can solve it, because it's in a way how the world in this domain operates. I do think there's been a shift even in the period since we started in 2022 versus now. So that's 3.5, 4 years. The quality of the scale ups, let's call them that, has been much higher, because at least in Europe, the money's been tight, been difficult to raise. And the only chance you had of any raising is if you are actually already either making revenues or generating revenues, and showing how that was going to work. So if you had a purely sort of hypothetical premise you were working from, many of those businesses have failed by now. Again, comes with a flip side, which is also a lot of investors think it's a shit industry to be in, because it's so little success to show. And I think what is often forgotten is sustainability as a topic is actually still quite young. If I go back to my consulting days working with these huge multinationals, no one had ever asked a sustainability-oriented innovation question before 2017. And we got one or two in 2017. And this is working with the biggest companies in the world. It just wasn't on their radar. No one cared. It was something for regulatory teams to work on, or compliance, not to bring into the innovation space. And if you keep that in mind, you realize also that a lot of the regulation even that is being put through is probably not going to be the final regulation, because it's like first attempt, but also a lot of the language isn't very evolved. And we've basically come down the infamous, let's say, Mount Stupid, like a lot of hype around the topic. And I think now we're getting to a much healthier sort of stage of startups, scale-ups, the investment universe around it for sustainability, where everyone understands, okay, here are the real problems we need to solve. These problems are probably all going to be much more along the lines of what's a line item we can remove, rather than, say, changing the CO2 level on the planet in one go. So it's becoming more specific and more pragmatic from that point of view. And as I said, you can just see it in the quality of the of the startups and scale-ups out there. They're just much higher than they were a few years ago when everyone just was working on, oh, the whole world is going to eat seaweed and everyone's going to become vegan. And it's just like, no, that's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You might wish it happens, but it's not going to. So your money's thrown away if you push it that way. So yeah.
So there's been let's say, coming back to senses and being more grounded into
Yeah,
reality.
totally. Yeah. And I mean, that's a topic in itself. I mean, the amount of wishful thinking that you see or saw in particular, where you're just wondering, what bubble are you living in that you think the world works this way?
Yeah, there's also a lot of, and also, not thinking of the difference and some pushing, maybe what I've seen a lot of some solutions that they were pushing in markets like this that are very unfeasible, or even some, they looked very awkward, to be pushed to some geographies.
You remind me of something funny. So we have a really, really nice, very simple, let's say, you could call it a little stage gate. Sort of what are some lenses we look through when we literally look through when we judge the commercial viability of a company. And we set that up very early days when we were literally doing our first sort of scouting. We're all being really proud and sort of, this is so smart and sophisticated. And then after like 6 months, we realized we need to put like a whole lens in front of it, which is just, does this go against the laws of physics? There was just so much nonsense. Like, and then we're just thinking how, and it, well, here's a thought for you. Maybe you've done a podcast on this already, but if you operate in this domain of professional investing, which sounds highly regulated, but in reality it isn't, there is a lot of fraud out there. A lot of businesses who are presenting the modern version of snake oil, which you just know is never going to work, but they still manage to find very naive people who believe it can, who with like very simple sort of, even, well, nowadays with ChatGPT and stuff like that, a very quick check on, are these metrics possible on planet Earth? It's just bizarre. It really is bizarre. But so I guess an example how it is cleaning up a little bit. I mean, you don't see as
Definitely.
many.
No. We had a fair share here of wonderful stuff that backed even by wonderful donors or others that have been completely a disaster, and also sometimes leaving a trail with farmers or others that really also touch livelihoods in a way.
There's a wise lesson in that somewhere. I mean, if you think about idealism, which of course the world of, let's say, Better for Planet has its fair share of, and many of it is good if it comes with some pragmatism. But a pure idealist who is not held back by any sense of grounding who operates purely from their bubble, they'll never achieve their ideal, but the amount of damage they do while getting there is stunning. In particular, I guess, just the amount of money wasted and people losing years of their life chasing something fundamentally impossible. And anyway, that's what we stay far away from at Una Terra.
And this is very interesting and important. And I want to, going towards the end of the episode, I want to see and to ask, I mean, since we have this in this shift, we have more pragmatism. We really want to be not only ideal but also pragmatic, because we know if businesses, they don't look also at the bottom line and the profit, they can never be deliver on the impact that many they have to. So what must change also in the capital markets, in the decision then, and also in the funding space to make really circular solutions, sustainable solution, not just the exception, the nice things to say maybe on a business case from the Harvard, but something that is really the default.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you can look at this, if you look at this, let's say medium term, like how you're framing it. I think our fund, and we're not going to be the only fund looking at it this way, but we are an early example of showing this is commercially sensible, because what you're doing to have less of a footprint on the planet, whether it's through carbon pollution or whatever, you can actually very easily also do from the point of view of commercial gains, just less wasteful. If anything, one wish I would have is that the language simplifies to things like just be less wasteful and more local in what you do, then all the other sort of problems start sort of falling away because you're grabbing it right literally at the core. So that's something I wish for. And I think the regulatory pressure is making some of that happen. I think also as we talked about before, the geopolitical sort of, let's say, turbulence is also going to help that happen. And I think from that point of view, within the domain of, let's say, all the sustainability, whether you look at the materials transition, whether you look at more sort of waste processing or energy, it's definitely, this is one space which just has immediate benefit on so many levels. It's probably going to survive. And I think on a longer term, and this is why I am genuinely hopeful, because I saw this already in my previous career, in the end, this comes into the hands of, let's say, the big industrials of the world. And of course, many of them, everyone knows, they're basically the products we use and buy every day, but there is 100 times more big industrials that you don't know of that sit sort of deeper in the supply chain, doing all kinds of ingredient production, etc. What they will be confronted with, and actually what they are already being confronted with, is on the medium to long term, if they are not getting their act together on cleanliness, sustainability, is they cannot attract talent. They cannot get young people to join their companies. And when you have, let's say, when you move into, let's say, an industrial space like lubricants, I mean, it's like a huge, mega multi-billion-dollar industry no one's ever heard of. They are trying to attract the smartest chemists, the smartest materials people from the universities, etc. These people will also have a choice, and they will work for the businesses. These are basically people who are in their teens now. They will work for the businesses who have a better for planet sort of purpose at their core. And if they don't, the only type of, let's say, personnel they will be able to get are mercenaries who are just in there for the money. And it's kind of, I mean, we saw it, of course, already happen in the big tobacco, let's say, field of tobacco companies. Very hard to attract talent, definitely in Europe and let's say in the Western markets. You already see it now come through in big food, where it's just, I mean, I remember from my previous life, I had clients in big food who had R&D openings just for years, unfulfillable. It's just no one wanted to take these jobs because they knew they were going to work on something which isn't really what you should be doing too much of. And in a way, that is my personal hope for, let's say, the younger generation coming through, is they're just demanding, and they will have a choice. So it's going to be, of course, a self-fulfilling prophecy in a sense that if all the smart people go to the businesses with the right circular or better for planet purpose, those companies will automatically also become better and better and better at what they do because they have the brighter people rather than the mercenaries who just want the big bonus at the end of the year to keep the machine running. So it's I think there's some very fundamental change already started, which we're just literally at the beginning of. And well, I guess I'm now 53 by the time I retire, if I do. But let's say in 10 years from now, I think we'll see a very different industrial market from that point of view, with maybe players surfacing to the top we haven't heard of yet, just because they were the quiet ones doing the right thing in the background.
And no, thank you so much for that. And it's really important. Those factors are often overlooked, but those are really the one that really puts companies, in the past of not being, the 1 year business, but 100-year business, and really create values and deliver. And if you have to give, as a closer for the episode, one message to our listeners listening from around the world, from your experience as founder and investor, which will be?
Yeah, it's look for the smallest problem to solve that is a problem for as many people as possible. Everything comes down to that.
And then you have a fantastic one. And also I like the one, be local, work at solving clear issues. So thank you so much for this wonderful episode.
With pleasure.
And it's been a pleasure and honor having you. Thank you, Costas. Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.